Oops.
All right. We're going live stream.
I didn't quite mean to set that, but we are live streaming now on YouTube. So just FYI.
Come on, Royce, we want to find out what it's like where you are.
Oh, Perry and Elizabeth.
I didn't quite mean to set that, but we are live streaming now on YouTube.
Ah.
So just FYI. Was that me or you guys?
That was delayed something.
Yeah,
Come on, Royce, we want to find out what it's like.
that was me. Okay.
Come on, Royce, we want to talk to you.
Connecting to audio.
Yeah, but it's been that way for
Yeah,
quite
I
a bit.
know. Yeah.
Lacey, you look very comfy. You've got your pretty blanket pulled up.
Yes, we're very comfortable, and all 3 dogs are with me, so they're very warm.
Yeah, I like your pictures of hunkered down. It's just blankets with dogs under them.
Yeah. Yeah, they have such a hard life.
Yeah.
Elizabeth, what is it like out there in your area? Have you been out?
Yes, we just got back from going up to my daughter's house to feed her dogs and decided to bring them home with us because I don't want to get out in this in the morning.
Good idea. Good idea.
Trout hardwood.
Mhm. Well, big. We're getting here.
Yep.
Hi, Diane.
Diane.
Good evening.
Diane, I was so excited to see you're going on a mission trip next month.
Going to Belize, and it's this month, February
Oh,
12th.
that's right.
Please. Yeah.
I forgot. Yeah, we're not in January anymore, are we?
No,
That's great. Are you going with a group?
VIM.
Good.
Yes, I've been to other missions, two to Nicaragua with Manos Juntas, and one to Bolivia with United Methodist. And I don't know, I don't think it was VIM. I think it was another category. But this is construction.
So do you wield a hammer, Diane?
I can wheel a mean hammer.
Good.
Had lots of training in my life. Yes.
Good.
I volunteered, however, to do more painting. I prefer to do painting at my age.
Mhm. Mhm.
I don't know that I want to be swinging a hammer. I could. Yeah. But I might do a lot of the toting and fetching.
Mhm.
Well, friends, it is 5 after. Our numbers are down a little bit. I imagine people are a little forgetful with the weather, and they're probably maybe, I don't know, napping or making chili or something. But thank you all for being here. We are online right now on YouTube. So if that makes a difference in, especially if we share any later in the service, any prayer requests, let's just wait till we go offline to do that. I'll introduce our speakers here in a little bit, but first let's just open with a song, and I'll put the words on the screen.
O day of peace that dimly shines through all our hopes and prayers and dreams, guide us to justice, truth, and love, delivered from our selfish schemes. May swords of hate fall from our hands, our hearts from envy find release, till by God's grace our warring world shall see Christ's promised reign of peace. Then shall the wolf dwell with the lamb, nor shall the fierce devour the small, as beast and cat will come ye grace. A little child shall lead them all, then enemies shall learn to love. All creatures find their true accord. The hope of peace shall be fulfilled, for all the earth will know the Lord.
Lacey, why don't you do the bold part for us and join us in this call to worship. Am I muted? Okay. All you brokenhearted and bereaved,
You joyful and well rested,
you overwhelmed and overworked, come.
all you disappointed and desperate,
You playful and delighted,
you angry and over it, come.
no matter the weather of our hearts, this day is sacred.
Let us worship God, love that never ceases.
Man, I'm a little out of practice on doing the whole Zoom and sharing screen and whatnot. Thank you all so much for being here. I asked, so as I have been out and about with some of our members as well in the community for the past 7 years, Jess Eddy pops up every once in a while. And I don't think Jess and I have really necessarily ever had a conversation, but I've seen him around. I know the work he does, the good work he does. And as many of you know, they had those prayer vigils every night the last few weeks before what we thought was going to be possibly the execution date for Julius Jones. I think Jess had something to do with that. There at the end, I realized sort of kind of who some of the key leaders were. And I had also been aware of Cece Jones Davis, Reverend Cece Jones Davis from Facebook. And she's done work with, I believe, Jonathan Martin and the Table here in the city. And then all of a sudden she was doing all this advocacy work, with Julius Jones. I just want to, Jess, I don't have any really big introduction for you, except you did go to OU, right? Are you an OU graduate or?
I am, yeah. Mhm.
And are you going to OCU or
I am a OCU law. Mhm.
Yeah, so Jess is in the OCU law school. I just want to read what Cece has, what it says about her on her website. Cece Jones Davis is an ordained minister, artist, speaker, and advocate, and dedicated her life to pointing people to the all-powerful and the least powerful, working at the intersection of faith, art, and social justice. She is especially passionate about seeing God's kingdom come in the areas of racial healing, women and girls issues, and criminal justice reform. So just to get, we really haven't spent a lot of time at all talking about tonight or even Mosaic, but if you don't know, so Mosaic, we're a different kind of Methodist church, and we are concerned about issues in our community, about social justice, and we are a church that's not afraid to talk about controversial topics either, and and also to get our hands dirty. And my theory as the pastor is, if you can't talk about real life in the church, you ought to be able to talk about real life in the church. And it's sad that in so many of our churches, we sort of put that kind of stuff, that become real life in our own lives, and then real life out there in the real world becomes controversial, right? And sometimes in the church, we just want to avoid controversy because pastors don't want people leaving, and we don't want people mad and all that kind of stuff. But Mosaic, we believe in tackling the tough issues. And I don't want to take too much time. You guys have got maybe 30 minutes, maybe even 45 minutes. And this is just kind of an open forum for you to tell us, maybe if you want to tell us a little bit more about yourselves. And really what I'm interested in is your interest in this, in Julius Jones. But if you want to broaden a little bit and just talk about your passion for advocacy and social justice and other areas that you're involved in and concerned about. But we do want to hear a little bit about just how you became so passionate about the cause of Julius Jones and some of the background you did. This is just wide open, so however you want to take it. We're people that's not afraid to ask questions either, so if we want to have a Q&A at the end, that's fine. I'll just remind us all, we are live streaming and I can stop that if we need to, but just a reminder about that. And I just want to welcome you to Mosaic. I'm so sorry we're not in person, but we have learned how to do a lot of stuff online. So Cece, Jess, welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Jess, do you want me to start or would you like to
Yes,
start?
Yes, please. You.
Okay. Listen, thank you, Reverend Scott, and all of you at Mosaic for welcoming Jess and I into your space. Thank you so much. I am an ordained minister in the Disciples of Christ Church, and I did help Jonathan Martin and others start the Table, which is a congregation mostly for the nuns and duns, you know, folks who have been disillusioned by the institutional church. And so I've done a lot of that. I am from Halifax County, Virginia. You probably don't know Halifax County, Virginia, but the only reference I'll give you is Henrietta Lacks, who was the African-American woman whose DNA cells were used to and replicated to lead to a lot of medical research that has advanced medicine today. Henrietta Lacks is from my same town. And so I grew up in Virginia, a state, in a town actually, which was the highest slaveholding county in the state of Virginia. And so a lot of what I saw growing up in the 80s, very much, I lived in a time warp in my community. We were very much behind socially. And a lot of what I experienced and watched my parents and grandparents experience really led me kind of on a journey around the work that I currently do. I attended Howard University, which is a historically Black college that was founded in 1867 in Washington, D.C., right after emancipation. And after that, I went to Yale Divinity School, where I was really able to take the time to bring my head and heart around what does ministry look like for an African American woman who has no real intention of working just within the four walls of the church. And so that took me on a journey. I started out actually in advocacy in HIV/AIDS. I was a volunteer at a hospice, at one of the oldest hospices in the country for people with HIV/AIDS. I started out working in that hospice, and that changed my life. That experience changed my life as a person and as a Christian. And I decided that, you know, what I wanted to do with myself, with my own life as a Christian, was to have a public witness that really spoke to the needs of hurting people and pulled people from the margins as best as I could. So that was really my entry work into justice work, advocacy work, and I've been doing this kind of thing, you know, for a really long time now. So for the last 15, 20 years. After that, I'm just giving you a little bit of background so that you understand kind of how my journey has gone, and then I want to pass it over to Jess. After that, I moved to DC to work for the Obama administration. I did not care what job I had in the Obama administration. I would have swept the floor, I would have mopped, I would have done anything to be a part of the first Black president's administration. And so for 7 years, I worked as a political appointee, assisting Ambassador Ron Kirk, who was the first US trade representative, the first African-American trade representative. And I learned a lot I learned a lot about so many things in that environment, a lot about skill sets and how skill sets are transferable in different situations. And then I moved, I needed a break. I left the administration. I moved to Oklahoma with my family because my husband got a job there. And I intended to be a stay-at-home mom, and was that for the first 3 years that I lived in Oklahoma. I did help to start that church, The Table, and had every intention to mind my business in Oklahoma, to do a little charity here or there, but to overall just mind my business and take care of my kids and let that be that. But I learned Julius's story just kind of inadvertently one night by watching The Last Defense, which was that documentary about him. And I was horrified after that. And I just couldn't sleep. And so the next day I Googled the attorneys who I had seen in the film, and connected with them, and then connected with Julius's story. And then, a very long story short, ended up holding community interest meetings at first, and then holding screenings of the film The Last Defense, and having public conversations around it. And because I really was afraid that we were going to kill an innocent person while I lived in Oklahoma, and I just wasn't willing to pay taxes and walk around Oklahoma like everything was okay. I just couldn't do it. I had no background in criminal justice reform or the death penalty or anything related to that. All I had was a real passion, and I feel a call from God, and some skill sets that I felt were, transferable. I knew how to talk to people. I knew how to get people in a room. I knew how to communicate my points, and I just started power mapping. And I started out by having maybe 10 meetings a week across Oklahoma with who I could Google in Oklahoma who seemed to be had any level of influence, faith leaders and nonprofit leaders and business owners, just any and everybody. I met with legislators, and just really then connected with people like Jess and JB and others to spread the work out and to build momentum. And so there was a lot, we saw so much happening around Julius Jones from September to November of 2021. And most people were paying attention during that time frame. But there was 3 years worth of work that was going on well before then. Hard, really arduous work, a lot of no's. The hardest thing in the world I have learned is to try to humanize a Black man on death row in the state of Oklahoma. That is the hardest thing I have ever tried to do. And, I am grateful, thanks be to God, that ultimately, the world leaned in, Oklahomans leaned in, and, we were able to get Julius's life spared. But I would say that we have not seen justice. Justice is about making things right. And we've not made things right for Julius Jones and his family. The Pardon and Parole Board voted twice that this man had some serious issues in his case and that his sentence should be commuted to life with the possibility of parole. But because the governor lacks courage, he decided to give him life without the possibility of parole. Julius Jones is 41 years old. He's a young man, a healthy man, a vibrant man who has been sentenced to a lifetime in prison. It's not right. And so we are going to continue our work. We've got to strategize and figure out what the next steps are. Jess and myself and other advocates have had to take some time to take a deep breath because all of this has been a lot. It's been very, very traumatizing in so many ways. And we can talk about that. We'd love to have a Q&A after Jess talks. But if it had not been for people like Jess and JB and faith leaders in the community like Reverend Scott and so many other people, this would not have been possible. This story would not have been, the story that I'm telling you now would not be where it is. And so I'm really grateful to have been what I believe used by God just as an instrument to affect some change, to mobilize, to pull some people together. But I totally believe this has been a divine act, a divine movement orchestrated ultimately by God, but there's been a lot of work done. And you know, from the vigils that Reverend Scott talked about to so many other activations, people really gave their all. You know, complete strangers really gave their all to make sure this man didn't die. And for that, I am going to always deeply be grateful to Oklahomans and to people across the country and the world. And with that, Jess, I'm going to pause and let you speak.
Okay. Yeah, it feels sinful for Cece to pause speaking that I might speak, because I just have learned so much and so appreciate what Cece has done for our state and for Julius's family, and so much that I've learned from her. I've worked for and with a lot of powerful people, but perhaps none as connected with the Spirit of God and a channel of that power, perhaps as the Reverend Cece Jones Davis. So, but I'm Jess. I'm from Oklahoma City, and I grew up in a predominantly Black community over a small city town of Forest Park, over kind of by the zoo here, and really got acquainted with you know, the impact of racism, be it criminal justice or larger socioeconomic policies and treatments of this state and these United States against Black people. And simultaneously, as a child, my parents were capital defense attorneys, death penalty lawyers, public defenders here in Oklahoma County. So I saw my parents struggle with the realities of injustice from an early age. And then my friends, as we grew from childhood and elementary school into middle school and high school. And I was, very privileged to not suffer a lot of the adversities that they did. And I went to the University of Oklahoma, where I began to work for the president there, the former president, prominent Oklahoman that most are familiar with, politician David Boren, and really got a glimpse into the reality of politics and people with power in this state and in America. I got into diversity and inclusion work at OU with a mission of helping students of marginalized backgrounds, first generation college students, impoverished students, Black students, other students of color to succeed there and learn more about the systemic barriers that our society and bureaucracies create for these students and the adversities that they face. And so over those decades of early life, I really grew frustrated about some of the more deliberate realities, things that have been done to people. And as we've all witnessed in Oklahoma, kind of the diminishing power of any electoral base to remedy the systemic injustices, hurting the marginalized and underrepresented in Oklahoma. Activism and community-based organizing became the natural outlet, or I should say ability alternative to electoral policy making to address these things. And in that work, it has become the most rewarding work of my life. I've only been engaged as a community activist and organizer for the last 3 years. But I've, and most of the times, we were fighting a losing battle. So, I got involved with the Justice for Julius Jones Coalition. My first encounter was with one of those screenings or community hearing sessions that Cece was referring to, some probably 3 or 4 years ago. And, it struck me as a particularly sad case, but also one that was very common as I'd grown up with these kinds of stories. And so I wasn't, closely involved really until the George Floyd movement and uprising empowered a lot of activism and advocacy for Black men and Black people in America in a lot of other spaces. And so I think it was around that summer of 2020 when I got to get to know Cece more and the Julius Jones family. Of course, Antoinette had been out. I knew her because she'd been out advocating for her brother for years, selling shirts, telling the story, doing what she can. And so, what came together was almost a perfect storm of events and circumstances to bring the right people together. And what is miraculous, not about, as Cece said, we haven't gotten the justice that we seek. Julius, the wrongs have not been righted. But what a lot of, Oklahomans and people who have observed this and people who are involved have some sense of hope that even though we may not have the power at the ballot, power in the courts, or much power in any system of government, we do have the moral power, the righteous power, and we are a power to be reckoned with when we stand together. And so I think in my conversations with Julius and I know Cece may talk about this some more, but one of the really miraculous things is that Julius cares not just for his own liberation, but for the liberation of others. And so this has been a egalitarian and altruistic piece of work that I think, while we are our preeminent object because we love his family and him, and this injustice is so grave, we must have it remedied. We do look for ways in which our collective work can improve the conditions and circumstances for all people suffering under the yoke of the new Jim Crow, the criminal justice system in Oklahoma. So, yeah.
Yeah, and so with you, thank you, Jess. And I do again want to underscore that, a movement cannot be accomplished by one person. It takes a lot of people. It takes a lot of agency to build what has been built for Julius Jones. And so, the last offense was, I always saw it as like an ember in my hand. And my job was to take that ember and to blow on it and to blow on it and to create a fire, to create a flame. And to watch that flame grow. And that flame only grew as people joined, because people brought their energy, they brought their resources, they brought their time, they brought their hearts. And so, that fire got to be so big that my job was to step back from it as other people added to the flames and manage it. Just make sure it didn't go too far this way, too far that way, just to make sure that the fire that needed to be built did continue to do good and not harm to Julius Jones. Jess can tell you that once something gets that big, it is quite the challenge to make sure that it is reeled in and that is kept, that is not controlled, but kept in a way that is still honoring of the core values. But we got it done. The world got it done. Oklahoma got it done. So we're grateful for that. With that said, I would like to pause and just allow anybody to ask. I would like to use the rest of the time for questions and answers.
Absolutely.
And if you don't feel comfortable speaking it out, feel free to use the chat.
Is there some way that you could identify a stage in a proceeding for a lot of different people who are coming before the court to try to pinpoint several of these cases where the justification of the police action or the whatever is not right? Is there some way you could develop a system of finding those before they get to a death sentence?
Yeah, I mean, Jess might be better at this, but here's what I'll say. I'm not a legal person, but there has to be a better process for the appeals court. You know, people think just because you go through 10 appeals that every issue has been considered on its merits in a person's case, and that's not true. What you found in Julius's story and so many other stories is that, you know, if everything was technically done correctly in a court, then that the next judge just kind of looks at the paperwork to make sure that all the technicalities were in place, but never really gets into the merits of the case. And I'll give you an example of this. Before the last offense came out, one of the jurors from Julius's trial from, you know, back in 2001, 2002, sent his attorneys a note over Facebook and said, this case has basically haunted me all of these years, and I really feel like there was a lot of racial bias in this case. This was a white woman, and that white woman was afraid at the time to sign an affidavit. And during the appeals process, the lawyers presented this information to the court. But because there was not an affidavit in place, because there was only, some messages on Facebook, they couldn't accept it. Here is a juror who has said, listen, I think there were some real problems here. And an appeals court has said, sorry, can't look at it. And he spends the next several years in prison before getting back in court. So there's so many instances of that in Julius's case and others, where our court appeal process is not set up to consider merits or new information or new evidence. It's just like, well, the first judge, crossed his T's, then I guess, it's okay, just pass it along. And I don't know how to change that, but I do know that it needs to be changed. Jess?
Yeah. I took the course that answers your question in law school, and it's called wrongful convictions, and it probably could have been 2 semesters worth of material, but I'll encapsulate it as best and efficiently as I may. We've got to start with policing, first interaction. Policing is a systemically biased and prejudiced system, particularly just towards people on the basis of race and socioeconomic status, but also prejudice to find a conviction. Once it gets to a detective, they do have quota systems that affect. And when you're talking about a large metropolitan area, particularly, police officers are strongly encouraged and incentivized to build cases and to achieve prosecutions. Then there is a symbiotic relationship between detectives and prosecutors where they put undue pressure on one another in particular cases or in particular circumstances that aren't necessarily based on what I would call public interest or justice, but subject to really undue influence that can drive cases. We see a lot of problems with cop interviewing processes. It's perfectly legal for police officers to lie to people in interrogations and say things that are threatening or put them into a mental situation that would compel them to admit to a crime they didn't commit or say some other inculpating statement. The abundance of that, the massive degree to which that occurs would startle any and all people. It's remarkable. It's largely uncovered, but people are pressured and forced in interrogations to admit to things, to witnesses to corroborate stories, to get prosecutions, especially in high profile cases, especially like Julius's. A lot of the stuff comes from what police detectives are doing with witnesses and to obtain evidence. People also don't know that things like eyewitness testimony is the most unreliable testimony there is. If you actually think about it, it's fairly difficult for me to describe to you what Cece was wearing and what she said to me the last time I saw her. It's just difficult. But we as a society think of eyewitness testimony to be the most reliable, and jurors tend to believe the same thing as well. But eyewitness testimony is usually supported by the district attorney telling the person, this is my case. Did you see what I think happened? And that's how eyewitness testimony develops. So that's a problem at the pretrial stage. In terms of prosecutions, you in Oklahoma County, for example, 9 out of 10 district judges are former prosecutors. We don't have a large number of people in elected office, as even judges, that have a criminal defense attorney background or this, that, and the other. So there's tons of areas for discretion, and generally speaking, judges strike the balance of discretion in favor of the prosecution. And that is because the prosecution is friendly with police, is friendly with the FOP. They have the political power to oust judges who are defense favorable. So there's some endemic issues there. At the appellate level, Cece's absolutely right. The appellate law is so stacked against the appellant, the person seeking relief, that it usually is struck down for some technicality. There's that never gets to they just hardly ever get to the merits of the case, where everybody thinks of appeals as, well, I just ask an appellate court judge to look at what happened, to look at the facts and say, did they get this right or wrong? Or there's some that hardly ever happens. It is exceedingly difficult to get that kind of look at the appellate court. And that's because, again, in Oklahoma, but throughout the country, criminal appellate court justices are former prosecutors and are pro-prosecution, and they're subject to election. And so there's very few that will do the kind of reform that we would seek. And it's so complex legally to understand what they're doing. It's just inaccessible. And that'll go back to us. I mean, to explain it to you all requires a legal degree almost, but that would go back to, I think, the largest problem, and this is what I've learned in law school, that as we think of American society so far progressed since the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act of the 60s, we kind of can understand what has progressed and what has not in terms of equity and equality. And then we can understand the progression from the Civil War up into the 60s, that 100-year period. If I were to tell you that the legal community, both philosophically and values-wise, that it is behind contemporary society, behind us by about 40 years, they are still stuck, and the law teaches one to be colorblind, for example. Well, we now know that we can't be colorblind because people are Black and brown and do experience a different treatment from that. So we're not colorblind, but the law is still stuck in that old way of thinking, that everyone's favorable, equal under the law. And so everyone had there's a famous Supreme Court case, I know I'm droning on, when Thurgood Marshall was still on the court, a death penalty case. And some lawyers brought tremendous research from professors at Stanford and several universities that demonstrated unequivocally that death penalty was applied in a racist way. There was just that even the judges agreed. Yeah, you know, 9 out of 10 cases, it's death penalty is black person. It's usually in a case where a black person is accused of killing a white person. In the same case, same kinds of facts where white people kill black people or white people kill white people, we're not seeing the death penalty. And that was over a 10, 15-year period. And the Supreme Court simply said, yeah, you know, juries are racist. And that's just America. And there's nothing that we can do to stop that. This is racist. And people don't understand that. I don't think they don't know the law, because the law is so inaccessible. The law is a bureaucracy that is specifically designed to confuse you. And if you want to learn it, to have to economically disadvantage you by costing you $100,000 to $150,000 in 3 years of your life, just to learn what they're doing, actually. So sorry, I'm sure I've just confused you more. But the law as a system is the problem inherently. It has not been brought up with us as we have, as a society, evolved around these issues.
Very good. Thank you, Jess. Very thorough. No, seriously. I mean, because I definitely, you know, I don't know the law. I just kind of know what's right and wrong, you know what I mean? But I don't know the law. So thank God for people who understand it. Like Jess, are there other questions?
I have a question. And one of the things that I heard was that when you have appeals courts, they don't look at what happened. They look at, was the trial fair? Were there technical problems? So if, like, I also heard that Julius Jones, I think it was a public lawyer, later said that he didn't believe Julius Jones at some point. And so later on, he admitted that he made a mistake in terms of defending him. But my understanding is that there's no going back at that point. Is that true?
Jess?
Yeah, so to answer the first question, on appeal, there's only 2 issues that you can raise to get to the next step of appeal. And that's that your lawyer committed an error sufficient enough that rendered the case unfair, or there was some the judge made a mistake that can reverse the whole case. And it's got to be a hard mistake. So just so you know, when we're talking about technicalities, you know, they're really high stringent standards. Regarding David McKenzie, Julius is a trial counsel. David was a young, inexperienced lawyer who had never tried a capital case. Capital cases aren't like regular felony cases, even a regular felony murder case, because according to Supreme Court law, you have to have 2 separate trials. One trial about whether or not the crime was committed, and a whole other trial about whether or not the death penalty is appropriate. And it's a whole set of other law. It's incredibly complex and sophisticated, and it's legal ethical misconduct to try a case and take on a case that you don't have sufficient experience enough to try. And that's the case here. It was David McKenzie and a law student, and they made numerous errors. Like the eyewitness testified that, you know, there was longer hair on the person who shot her brother. Well, you know, the trial attorney failed to introduce a picture of Julius that showed he had hair about as long as mine at the time. And even though on appeal, that's not going to be an error sufficient enough to reverse a case. Do you get what I mean? Like that, like the standard is so high.
You would think it would, but it's not. And in the last defense, if you haven't seen it, you can watch it. You can go to justiceforjulius.com to see that Mr. McKenzie, you know, talks about the ways that, you know, that his defense of Julius failed. And I think all that stemmed from the fact that Julius was a young Black teenager, 19 years old at the time. And there was an assumption there that whatever he was being charged with, he was guilty of. And so, David McKenzie might have visited Julius before the trial, maybe once, and then the young lady who was also Robin Bruno, who was just freshly out of law school at that time and had just passed the bar, she was the one who was trying to visit Julius and put all this piece of stuff. But if David McKenzie didn't have the experience, Robin Bruno, who had just graduated law school, definitely didn't have capital case experience. And so, this was really a good example of how the system fails sometimes, and the system definitely failed Julius Jones.
And Miss Schaller, is it Schaller?
Schaller, yes.
I have to say this, and I know in regards to your questions about David McKenzie's changing descriptions of what happened or what he believes. I know David McKenzie very well personally, and David McKenzie is a very ill person. And I don't mean to judge him. I'm not trying to condemn him, but I am going to say that in response to that, as I'll say, in the legal community, substance abuse problems pervades more than any other profession. Lawyers suffer from addiction, and David is not immune to that. And I'm going to say that, and I could say much worse things. Cece knows that I've contemplated saying, but that is in my full understanding of why David's narrative has changed over the years about what happened and who was innocent or not.
Wow.
It seems to me to be really difficult to attack this problem one person at a time. The real problem is capital punishment.
Mhm.
And so where are we? I haven't lived in Oklahoma all that long. There's a church on every corner. I mean, ostensibly we're a Christian state, but where are we relative to being able, for instance, to have a vote on the ticket that votes against capital punishment? I mean, would we just lose overwhelmingly, or where are we on that kind of issue? Because, I mean, I admire you for the efforts you put in for Julius Jones, but it is just, it's like fighting fire just a little bit at a time, and we need to put the fire out. And I just wonder where we are on that issue.
Reverend Scott, did you have your hand up to say something?
Well, I just wanted to say that right now I can't think of his name, but there's a pastor in Edmond who I know visited with Julius, I think.
Is it Don Heath?
Yes, Don Heath, and he's been involved in anti-capital punishment stuff.
Yeah.
And I was in a meeting with him once. I don't have any details, and so Cece and Jess may know more facts and stats and whatnot. And I know we all get at a point too where we sometimes just say something, but he said one time recently, and it wasn't really in a conversation about Julius per se, but he just said, "I'm ready to give up," he said, "because in Oklahoma, this just feels like such an uphill battle facing the death penalty, that the culture of our state is just not open to even having this discussion." Now, I know that isn't there something coming up this legislative session with about the death penalty, about having this, what is that?
Representative Maury Turner.
Yes.
And I really appreciate the question too, because first of all, you're absolutely right. Like that among so many other things is like the fire, right? That we need to be putting out. There is a national effort right now that is really growing to abolish the death penalty in all states. Right now, I want to say the death penalty has been abolished in 27 states, I want to say. And there's a lot of people working to get it abolished across the board, because what we have found, and I think Jess spoke to it earlier, it's scientifically proven that the death penalty is a racist practice, that in Oklahoma alone, an African-American man is 3 times as likely to receive the death penalty if the victim is white, as opposed to if the victim is Black or another person of color. And so, those statistics are pervasive across the country. And that's why people are committed to abolishing the death penalty. One of the things that I'm hoping comes out of all of this is an awareness, a deeper awareness among Oklahomans. Before Julius Jones, there were 10 people on Oklahoma's death row who have been exonerated because of prosecutorial misconduct or actual innocence. That is a really big number. 10 people have almost lost their lives to the state of Oklahoma. And nobody really talks about that. But we have to start talking about the fact that these man-made systems are flawed because people are flawed. Right. And so, there is the Oklahoma Coalition to Abolish the Death Penalty, which Reverend Don Heath is the chair of currently. And they need more members. That's the bottom line. They need people passionate about this issue. In terms of the church on every corner, it baffles me, to be honest, but it really does point to, I think, a core problem in Oklahoma and other states. And that is that a lot of times Christians will honor tradition more than we will honor the actual life of Christ, right? And that if Christians really rose up against the death penalty across this country, the death penalty would end. That's the bottom line. But because Christians are so pro-death penalty, basing their theologies and deeply rooted in the Old Testament and deeply rooted in Paul's writings, as opposed to the life and the teachings of Jesus Christ, therein lies the problem. Very, very flawed theology that creates a vengeful attitude in us that makes us believe that, oh, this is okay because Paul said whatever the government wants to do, the government has a right to do. And so there's a lot of theological deconstruction that needs to happen around these social issues, like the death penalty. And the death penalty won't be abolished in Oklahoma unless white people, white evangelicals in particularly, do some unraveling around the crazy notions that they have around that Bible of theirs. They're going to have to do some serious deconstruction. Now, Representative Maury Turner, is she District 88, Jess?
I believe that's correct.
Yes.
Okay, has just announced that she is going to propose a state question to abolish the death penalty as a result of all the work that's been done in recent years around Julius Jones. And of course, it's because there's been a bloodbath in Oklahoma in recent times for people who have been executed, that she's going to put forth a state question. I think Maury, just you tell me, but I think Maury's going to have a really hard time because Maury is, what Republicans would say is one of those liberals. And I don't think she is going to have an easy time getting this to where it needs to be, but I am so grateful for her public witness and for what she's trying to accomplish. Jess, what would you say to that?
Oh, absolutely. The death penalty is unconscionable, and they've been fighting for a long time. I don't think there's a white man on death row that's getting a lot of Republican support. Cece, what's his name? Gossip. And yeah, and we'll see how his case proceeds, but I think we're right now more at a 55-45, 45 for abolition of the death penalty and 55. And so I think it's getting closer to the realm of possibility. There are a lot of people that are vengeful, that a lot of people that won't do it just because it was Julius Jones that stirred it up. But as we get to this white man who has an actual innocence claim, we could see some of that intractability to resolve. I would say, and I meant to mention this earlier to all you all, and I apologize, but I cannot say her name yet. But I can tell you it's a she. But there is a wonderful woman. I've been very disheartened. Cece and I were having some shared joy yesterday. But there's a wonderful woman who is going to be running for the district attorney in Oklahoma County. And right now we have a tough race there. No good candidates. Who's going to run as a Democrat. And it'll be coming out soon. And this is what I'm going to encourage her to establish as a part of office. And I think eventually it should be statutorily mandated for every district attorney's office in the state that we need to have a convictions integrity unit, because these independent convictions integrity units can review, almost like an appellate court could, these cases, and with an eye towards injustice. And it should be a state job. It should be something out of the Attorney General's office, but probably not right now. But that's what more progressive communities throughout this country are doing. These are conviction integrity units that analyze cases in real time and look backward at cases like Julius Jones. What Cece and I know is that there's probably some Julius Joneses on death row still. There are without a doubt hundreds of innocent men and women under LWOP, life without parole, in Oklahoma right now. And I'm pro-abolition of that as well. But I certainly think that people who were thrown, especially Black people, whose lives were thrown away by the bushel in the 90s in the Macy administration and up till now, we have a lost generation rotting in Oklahoma's prisons, but throughout the United States, that deserve our contemporary understanding of what's right and wrong, and our eyes to look at that. And I think that we have an opportunity in Oklahoma County coming here soon. So I would encourage you to reach out to that district attorney candidate once she gets her campaign off the ground, and say you want a conviction integrity unit. Conviction integrity unit is the buzzword and would go so far towards stopping and revisiting a lot of the injustice.
So good.
When is that election going to be?
That's going to line up with the midterms. So we'll have the the governors, the June primaries, the November general.
Okay. Well, we're now at 6 o'clock. So I kind of want, or 7 o'clock. I want to honor the fact that we've gone an hour. Obviously, this is a huge, huge topic. And multiple, ways we could, multiple paths we could take, right? And it's all intertwined, it's intersectional. It's just, there's so much here. And I just want to thank Cece and Josh for taking time out to be with us. I've got a list of questions, but I wanted you guys to have your chance, and maybe we can have you back. And I know, can you just tell us real quick though, what is next for Julius? We've not just given up. So what is actually next?
Yeah, absolutely. No, we have not given up. We will not give up on Julius. We are in the throes of kind of strategizing what's next. But what we know is that we want to take the momentum that has been built in Oklahoma and across the country and stabilize it and make it sustainable to do good in Oklahoma in Julius's name. Julius is very passionate about youth, mentorship, civic engagement, like voter rights. He's really obviously very well versed and interested and passionate about criminal justice reforms. And so we are going to take his passion and run with it in Oklahoma, and, God willing, across the country. But we're not going to let it go. We definitely will not let this go. And, in the meantime, his lawyers are also working and doing their research on the constitutionality of the governor's executive order. That executive order said that Julius would never be able to have come before another pardon and parole board ever again in his life. And so they plan on fighting that, in what time frame, I'm not absolutely sure, but you guys will hear more and more about Julius and what we're going to be doing as things roll out. And I just ask you to please engage, please be a part. If some of us didn't take, and I've always seen this effort like a loaf of communion bread. If we did not all line up to take a piece of it, Julius would not be alive. And so when it's time and when opportunities present themselves, please line up and take a piece of this, because it's a heavy lift and it's going to take everybody.
Yeah, I want to add just on that. I think before I got into the movement, I always thought, oh, you couldn't accomplish anything without thousands of people that would show up and support the cause. And I just mean the movement work has taught me the opposite of that. It takes it takes a friend, but it doesn't take much bigger, or it can be even a smaller group than the people on this call that can radically change the state of Oklahoma policy. It is remarkable. So if there are things that you're passionate about, I've seen people change major things with 5 or 6 of them. And Cece is just one individual who was moved by the Julius Jones documentary, who decided to take upon herself to advocate. And so, I mean, I'm telling you, even one person willing to do labor for the greater good is powerful beyond measure. And you can accomplish things that you just think looking at you couldn't. I mean, she's a testament to that.
So Jess and Cece, you both are welcome to come to Mosaic at any time, be a part of our community. And Cece, we are definitely, what a story to have come here for one reason, but then to have your life changed also by being here. And so let's close with a song. Lacey, I think Lacey's still on. And then those who want to stick around, we can share any joys or concerns we have, and we'll sort of close with our usual prayer ritual. But we'll close with this song, and then those who want to go can go, and we'll stick around for those who want to stick around. Let me pull the words up. Lacey, you there?
Yep.
Okay.
There is room in God's great welcome. See, the doors are open wide. Here on earth as in God's heaven, hear the call to come inside. There is so much room for difference, men and women, gay and straight. In God's love, the rooms are countless, but there is no room for hate. There is room in our good nation if we stand on justice ground. God has made a good creation, colors, cultures, all abound. Welcome, sibling, all those yearning to breathe free. There is room for one another, but no room for bigotry. There is room for understanding for the outcast and the poor. For the Christian, Jew, and Muslim, there is room for these and more. For the people on the fringes, for the ones with long career, there is room for building bridges, but there is no room for fear. There is room in faithful churches for the wounded and oppressed, women who've been told they're worthless, refugees who feel distressed, immigrants who fear the future, people scorned and pushed and shoved. God, may we seek what you treasure. May we all make room for love.
Thank you, Lacey. And again, thank you to Cece and Jess for being with us. So
Absolutely. Thank you all. Have a wonderful evening.
you too. Anybody want to share any joys or concerns or prayer requests?
A neighbor who's having cancer treatment. Those who are out in the cold.
Yep.
One of my coworkers at cafe who's going to court to get custody of his kids. They're in CPS right now, but so he's got to start the process.
A friend who is fighting the legal system that is so unfair and unforgiving. Prayers for him.
And for the homeless.
Yes. I like to look at animals too. They're out in the cold.
I want to lift up my sister Caroline. You guys know that she's incarcerated, and we had planned to talk by video last month, and it got shut down because they shut down all their activity, email and video chats. And I finally got to email her last week, and we set a video chat up for next week, and it got canceled today. So they've obviously gone on some lockdown, and she's had COVID and had a pretty bad one. And to think about having a pandemic sweep through a jail where you have nowhere to go,
God.
It's just amazing. So, I mean, there's 1,500 people down there in Fort Campbell, and they're just passing this disease to each other. So everybody who's incarcerated, and specifically the mental health of those who can't talk to their loved ones, it's got to be horrible. Her name's Caroline.
Jonathan, is there a way we can send her mail or mail via online?
I can, yes, there's a post office box, and I can gladly get that to people.
Okay.
Thank you.
People that were caught in the fire today.
All the emergency personnel who are out there working tonight.
Yes.
Amen.
Yeah, and there's also this, I don't know what you call it. These truckers have had this protest going on at the US-Canadian border. Have y'all heard about that? They don't like the COVID restrictions of the Canadian government, and they're blocking the I think it's on the western side of the nation. It's causing havoc in this Canadian town because the trucks are so backed up and they're not moving that they can't get to like the grocery stores and all that kind of stuff. But there's talk about truckers going across our country to DC now to protest whatever it is they think that our government's not doing right with COVID either. But evidently they created quite a traffic jam in this one town on the border between Canada and the US. And I guess, I can't think of his name, but the Canadian guy, he has just said, I'm concerned about people's health, and we're going to keep going forward with our COVID restrictions, whatever they are. I'm not going to give in to these truckers. So, but anything else?
Stay
the justice system really is slanted against our brown and black brothers or the poor.
Yeah, this whole thing with the homeless also is just such a mess because they just get moved from campsite to campsite. And a lot of times they lose their possessions. And there's someone in the Norman area with this legislature who's wanting to make it so that in the same way, if you're doing a building project, you have to have, go through the proper channels and have all the licenses and everything. They're wanting to say if you've got a homeless campsite, you've got to be properly,
permitted.
Have a permit and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, what are they going to do? Are they going to put all these homeless people in our jails, which are already crowded, or look, what are they going to do? And there's always a sense in which the city and those in power never quite know what the solution is, right? They just never can seem to solve it. So it becomes just this never ending. They get phone calls from, citizens who are upset. And if they're on private property, they're going to show up. They're going to move on private property. If they're on public property, it's going to take them longer to get to them. So, and I know Lee and Mary know this, and maybe you do too, but when you know where some of these campsites are, and sometimes they're in plain view, right? You'll see them one week, next week they're gone, right? And you don't know if they packed up and moved or if they just got moved out and they lost their stuff, right? It's a never ending cycle. And there's a church in Denver that has put in these really heavy duty tents. They're not really tents. They're not houses. They're not tents. They're sort of in between. And it was I think it just made the Methodist news this week, but their whole parking lot is full of these structures that are tent-like, but they're sturdier than tents. And some groups don't want people doing that. They don't want to have you concentrate the homeless in one area, like in little houses, right? And if you were here last fall when Bo came from Clark Memorial, that's what he wants to do. And he's getting support for that, but he also has to have that church property rezoned, right? And he has to get his neighbors on board and all that kind of stuff. But I didn't realize there's this group in the city that actually has a site with little small houses for youth. And it's right here in the city. And I didn't really realize, I think is it called Thrive or something? Is that right, Mary?
It's Pivot, I think.
Oh, Pivot. Yeah, I just saw that on Facebook and I was intrigued by that because, but I also I follow Cece, and so they've been posting more and more of like when the youth get their own apartments or they even sign a lease. They've learned skills and they're getting off the streets. Today, when it was under about 25 degrees, and we served about a dozen people, Mary, today.
Probably all told about 40 in the different sites that we went to.
Yeah, so when we left our normal site today, we tried to drive by a couple different parking lots. We thought there might be some people, but we went to Open Arms because Open Arms has an outdoor blessing box, which they put food in it. And as we pulled up, there was a truck there with 3 homeless people, and there was 2 other women that walked up, and a guy walked up. And as we drove off, I saw 3 more people crossing the street that I know were going right to that blessing box, So here it was, 25 degrees. It was after 1 o'clock. So, it's going to get bad. And one guy was on a bicycle and he already had food, 2 bags of food he'd gotten out of the box. And we gave him 2 bags with hot chili in it. And then I asked him, are you on the street? And he said, yes. And I said, do you need a sleeping bag? So I gave him 2 sleeping bags, 2 tents, and 2 blankets. And he was on a bicycle trying to carry all of that. And you would have thought it was Christmas Day. Like he was so ecstatic to get those blankets and those sleeping bags and that tent. I mean, he was ecstatic. So
we went to a church on Walker that
Wait a minute. So the fire engine you heard, there's a church on Walker that is abandoned, was on fire. And later on, we went there, there's 10 homeless that are staying in that church. And for some reason, the fire department just soaked all their gear. So they had nothing dry. So we went, handed out blankets, sleeping bags, food. We have another friend that's on the street with another vehicle. Both of us wound up out there restocking them.
And people, there were 2 cars that come along beside us when we were at the church that stopped to say, you know, that they were in need too. And you could tell that they were in desperate need. That the woman that was in the car was just like this, just shivering. And we gave her a blanket and you know, whatever other things that we could give her.
And groceries.
But it's horrible out there. You just, it even shocks me as much as I've been around the homeless situation. I'm shocked at people that are in such desperate need.
Anything else? Take a look and see who's here. I'll pull up our prayers. God, our creator, your will for all people is health and salvation. We praise you and thank you.
God of love.
Anna Faye.
God the Son, you came that we might have life and might have it more abundantly. We praise you and thank you, God of love. Yvonne.
Don't forget to unmute.
God the Spirit, you make our bodies the temple of your presence. We praise you and thank you, God of love.
Jonathan, are you still there?
I am.
Will you do the next one?
Sure. Holy Trinity, one God. In you we live and move and have our being.
Praise you and thank you, God of love.
Tony.
Holy One, grant your healing grace to all who are sick and disabled, that they may know. Hear us, O God of life. Maggie.
Grant to all who seek your guidance and to all who are lonely, anxious, or despondent, a knowledge of your will and an awareness of your presence. Hear us, O God of life. Diane.
Mend broken relationships and restore those in emotional distress to soundness of mind and serenity of spirit. Hear us, O God of life. Becky, unmute.
Bless physicians, nurses, and all others who minister to the suffering, granting them wisdom and skill, sympathy and patience. Hear us, O God of life. Bob.
Holy death, and uphold by the grace and consolation of your Holy Spirit those who are bereaved. Hear us, O God of life. Scott.
Restore to wholeness whatever is broken by human sin in our lives, in our nation, in the church, and in the world. Hear us, O God of life. Howard, are you there?
You are the God who does wonders. You have declared your power among the people.
Among the peoples.
Kathy.
With you, Holy One, is the well of life. And in your light, we see light. Jerry. Hear us.
Hear us, O Lord of life.
Heal
us
and make us whole.
Eternal God, you call us to ventures at which we cannot see the ending, by paths as yet untrodden, through perils unknown. Give us faith to go out with courage, not knowing where we go, but only that your hand is leading us and your love supporting us through Jesus Christ our Lord. That all those are sending forth. Listen for the gentle ushering of the Spirit. Go forth, all you beautiful beings, doing your best to get by. Feel the assurance of cosmic love in your life. Rest, play, mourn, rattle cages of oppression. Let your full humanity be an offering, for God goes with us and within us. Lacey, are you still here?
Y'all.
Woohoo!
Shalom to you now. Shalom, my friends. May God's full mercies bless you, my friends, in all your living and through your loving. Christ be your shalom. Christ be your shalom. Shalom to you now. Shalom, my friends. May God's full mercies bless you, my friends, in all your living and through your loving. Christ be your shalom. Christ be your shalom.
Y'all are welcome to stay on as long as you want chatting. I'll be right back.
I love that line about rattling the cages of oppression.
Yes.
Sounds
like that one too.
trouble. And with that, we're going to sign off and go eat some dinner.
Yes.
Love y'all.
Love you.
We have a hot date for bridge with one of those little people down there, Lacey Meow. Love y'all. Take care.
Bye.
Night.
All right.
Y'all have a good night. I'll sign off too. Take care.
All right, Jonathan, y'all take care.
Thanks.
Bye, Bill. Bye, Becky.